Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the I Think Therefore podcast. I'm your host, TJ Carpenter. This is episode number 2. I made it to number 2. All right, so really quickly, before we get the episode started, I would like to apologize for being so long-winded last episode. I'm going to make this next episode significantly shorter, so everybody will hopefully be more willing to listen to the whole thing, and I will ramble less. So here's the thing. I just want to say this right up front. I wasn't really clear about why I wanted to do this podcast up front, and so I'm going to try to be a lot more clear here in just a second. But first, I wanted to give a shout out to some people who gave me some feedback on episode number 1. First of all, Rob, thank you very much for the email. I read the paper by William Clifford that you sent me, and also watched a video on YouTube so that I could understand what I just read. And no, in all seriousness, there are some very good YouTube videos out there on William Clifford's paper on ethics. Just type in William Clifford and ethics, and it should come up. So I would definitely check that out. It's a really cool video. I'll try to provide a link to it in the description of this video here on YouTube. But I will say, just to quickly summarize William Clifford's thoughts on this, on morality, on how to believe in what you should believe in and not in what you shouldn't believe in. And basically, what he said is, if I could summarize this, it's something that I used to say when I did sports talk radio when I was trying to explain why I was wrong about something. It's okay. Here's William Clifford's thoughts on how to choose what to believe in. He basically says, I would rather be wrong for the right reasons than to be right for the wrong reasons. That is basically what William Clifford thinks. So what he's saying is that if you want to build a system of belief on something, even if you end up being correct, if you built it on bad premises or faulty reasoning, then it's still wrong. Just because you got the answer right does not mean that you did the work that makes you get the right answer. So it's really... I used to say that all the time when I was trying to explain why I was wrong about something. It wasn't my fault. The universe is probabilistic. No, I think that's generally correct. I think I would agree with William Clifford, and I think Rob, excellent paper reference. I would love more feedback. So basically last episode we were talking a little bit about how to start an origin of belief. And I know that Sherry, who reached out on Facebook, also want to give a shout out to Sherry. She would love to be able to give me feedback in real time. Which I will say, Sherry, we can do that once we get to 200 subscribers on YouTube. So that's our goal. Get to 200 subscribers for this podcast/channel, and we will have a live show in which I will let Sherry dominate the floor. She will be like Nurse Ratched in the asylum and just lord her power over all the inmates, including myself. If the episode ends with me being lobotomized, I will not be surprised. No, seriously, I would really love to do that. I would love to answer questions in real time. I would love for us to all have an open discussion. That would be great. So let's go ahead and get into episode number 2. Really quickly, though, if you would like to donate to this, I think we should probably switch over to a Patreon type thing, and then we can put in goals and things like that. And people can donate to the podcast if they so choose. And yes, and it's we don't have to do the GoFundMe thing, which I feel like I just picked the wrong platform for raising money for that. So, like I said, all of the money that we do raise for the show, all of those funds are going to go to booking guests and then production material. Things like music and doing interviews and some really nice things that we've got in store for a video series as well on YouTube. But everything after that, after we've gotten that, we're going to donate all the money that you guys put together to causes that you want to donate to. So I just want to let you know that that's what the money is going towards. I'm not just sitting up here, funding my ethics yacht experiment. That's not what I'm doing. So those are my thoughts on the podcast. And so I would love to build a community around this. And I think we're off to a good start. Rob has given us feedback. Sherry's given us feedback. And I know that some others out there will be giving us feedback once we have a topic or a subject that piques their interest. Because there's a lot of people that I think I've started this conversation with about belief and ethics and morals and things like that in the past who have been very engaged on different social media platforms. So I think there's a home for this show. And I think that a home is about people. And so if people who are enthusiastic about this, as I am, are willing to engage with us, you don't need to give your money to me. I don't really care about that so much as I care about you and what you think. And so to start episode number 2, I figured I would change my tactics here. I was going to try to do this a little bit more formulaically, but I think it's better if I just sort of explain this to people about kind of, just kind of free form, the way that I've done things in the past, and then we'll try to organize things later. I wanted to say this up front. So the reason why I decided to start doing this is because I spent a very long time not really knowing or caring to know answers to these really big questions. But I always kind of had this itch for an answer, and it always frustrated me that I could never really get to the point to where I believed in something, because there was a lot of pressure on me as a kid to believe in things. And I didn't buy it, when I was a kid. And, I think a lot of people don't have that for one reason or another, and maybe they're not as skeptical as I was when I was a kid of that kind of thing. And what's weird is that I was really skeptical of big things like that, which most people accept. And then they're a lot smarter about small things. And I get small things wrong all the time. And so what I decided I would do finally, after a long time of not believing in anything and not really trying to believe in anything, I decided, you know what? I'm going to start from scratch. And I'm just going to say, what if I could try to build a belief system on my own? And what if I try as many things as possible and get other people's perspectives on those things, and just try to really, I don't want to make it out as like a belief buffet, but I really want to try to expose myself to as many ideas as possible. Because what I'm starting to find out is that religion and belief is built a lot on perspective and what your perspective of the world is. And so our first episode, I started off by saying, look, here's what I think. I think that I am, and I know that that's true, because by questioning it, my own existence, I prove my own existence. Because I couldn't question it if I didn't exist, right? So there's a quality to being me. That's all episode 1 was about, really. Because I think that we got to start somewhere when it comes to things that are really true, that we know are true, 100%. And, I think that's really important, because a lot of times we just we kind of grow into our assumptions about the way that the world works, and we don't really remember how we got there. And some of us never question it. I've always seemed to question it, and I know a lot of people who also question it, but I also know that there are other people who haven't. And I'm not saying one way is right and one way is wrong. I do want to talk about right and wrong, but I don't think that any of us really had a choice in the circumstances in which we were brought up, or the fact that we were brought up to begin with. None of us chose our own births. So that's kind of a weird thing that we have to handle. That all this stuff is kind of thrown at us before we're really prepared for anything. We don't even know that we're being prepared for something. And then all of a sudden we realize that all this stuff, all this sensory information that's being overloaded into our systems when we're children is in some way, shape, or form an attempt to prepare us for what's about to happen. And then by the time we're in it and into life, we look back, we're like, what was all that about? None of that made any sense to me. And now I realize none of it makes sense to anybody else out here either. So I got to kind of have to start over. And then you realize where you're at in the whole thing. And then it looks really weird. And maybe not everybody's been through that experience before. So I understand if what I just explained made no sense to you whatsoever. You were just like, because my mom was that way. She she was like, she knew what she thought of the world and the universe from a very young age, and that never changed, and she never questioned it. And I always really admired that, and I always felt inadequate looking at it because I wasn't that way. I really questioned a lot of things. So I had to do this. I had to try to figure out some stuff, and I think that this is maybe the best way to do it. For a long time, my sports talk radio show was kind of like open therapy for me. And a lot of long suffering sports fans, whether they were in Kansas City or Arkansas or Denver. And so, there's like kind of this stick to sports adage, and I didn't really want to stick to sports anymore. But I still need to talk to people, and I still need to talk at least to the air, at least to myself, because that's really what talk radio was all about. And so I decided to do this instead because and look, I want to talk to Buddhists, I want to talk to Muslims, I want to talk to Christians, I want to talk to people who are Sikh or Jewish or Orthodox Jewish or any religion out there, any denomination of religions, because I think there are a lot of different people who do things in different ways and always have rationale for one way or another. What I would really like to try to do is take a scientific approach to this, because I was thinking about how to explain my perception of of myself at current state. Because I've been doing these meditations, and one of the things that I've found to be really interesting is Sam Harris has this app called the Waking Up app. I pay for it. It's expensive. I'm not gonna lie. It's like $15 a month, and you would say, "Why are you spending $15 a month on an app?" And I would tell you that it's because it's kind of been foundational in changing how I view the universe. And you say, all right, that might be worth $15 a month. Okay, so what does that mean? It's not really as profound, I think, as I make it out to be, but in a lot of ways, it's made my everyday life much better. There's some daily meditations on there. It's a way to kind of get into your own brain and things like that. But I started doing these meditations that are they're a different section on the app. It's not the normal meditations. This guy named Richard Lang, and Richard Lang is he knows some things. He knows some things about the way your brain is mapped, the way that you can maybe describe things to yourself verbally to change your perspective on what it is you're experiencing every day. And I think for people who have never tried to do this or have never experienced meditation before, it's a unique experience. And I think it can certainly give you a new perspective on how easy it is to change your perspective, especially when it comes to things like spirituality. Because I was always raised, and I was raised in a Christian denomination. I was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and um, I say Christian denomination because I know that there's probably going to be some people who are Jehovah's Witnesses who listen to this, and I don't want to alienate them. They do not like being referred to as a cult. I understand why. I also understand why some people are insistent on calling them a cult. So there's different perspectives to everything, but I definitely don't want anybody to feel like they're not welcome to listen to this podcast, certainly. But yeah, I mean, Bible stuff. So that's kind of how I was raised. I was raised with an external view of religion, that it was a hierarchy with God at the top, who's in charge of everything, do whatever he wants. And then below that, you've got Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and then there's kind of a triumvirate of those things that operate as one being or three separate beings or both one and three simultaneously, depending on which denomination of Christianity that you subscribe to. So, that's kind of how Christianity is viewed. It's viewed as hierarchical. It's kind of mapped the same way that human culture and society is structured. And you can also see how in the Bible that there are a lot of external things that were built out of, like, I'm talking about, the way that, um, you know, uh, the congregation ended up being structured, and I think the way that most churches are structured end up being really institutional and cultural, and those are very human things, and you can see the earmarkings of all of those things and monarchies and different types of government. In the first century Christianity, they were implementing kind of communist themes, socialist themes in the first century Christian congregation and things like that. And so you see all these different institutions melding and meshing with the spirituality and the belief systems. And I think for especially kids, that can be very confusing, because there's a whole side of spirituality that is separate from that, and separate from the structure of religion. And look, I will tell you that I personally do not find the structure of religious institutions to be comforting, but a lot of people do. A lot of people need the the structure of being a part of a group and feeling protected by being in a group because there's strength in numbers and feeling like you're a part of a collective. We know that human beings like doing that. We know human beings like being a part of a collective religiously, politically, sports wise. I mean, we create collectives around pretty much anything that's popular, or I mean, anything that's, I mean, that's what being popular means, but pretty much anything that is entertainment, that like we create collectives around music and movies and different genres of those things. So like there's a human need to be around other people and feel like you're a part of a group. So I feel like that there's certainly some cultural and institutional value in those things existing. However, from a let's guide you down the path to get you to a place to where you feel purpose and meaning and all of those things that will give you fulfillment in life. I don't necessarily know if the institutional side of those things, the rules and the regulations, lead to that actualization moment. I don't necessarily think that those two things always help one another. Because once again, people are different. People's brains are mapped differently. People need different things. People emphasize different things for different reasons. So, once you start to realize how much you are a byproduct of the environment that you grew up in, and less so because you were just fortunate enough to be born into the right religion or to the right culture or to the right whatever geography. Um, that's I was. It's funny. I was having a conversation with somebody online today about voting, and I said, voting has two values. You know, individual subjectivity, which is the first value of a vote, which means that you get to choose how to use it if you want to, even or not. And then the second value of your vote is geographic. So, like, those are really the only two values of a vote. And I think that you can say the same thing is true about belief systems a lot of times. Just the same way that the way that you get to choose your vote, how to use that, um, because it's individually subjective. I think the same is true with how you get to apply your spirituality. That's your choice. There are very few things in life that you get to choose, but aligning yourself in one way or another with one principle or another seems to be a choice. And I know that is one of those things that a lot of people would debate. So we get back to like this tree of what's true, and like you could say, well, my subjective experience is true. That's right. That's right. And then somebody else will come along and say, murder is wrong, and then you have to decide whether or not that's absolutely true. And then you start to wonder, okay, well, why would I say that that's true? Because most people would say intuitively, I believe that. I believe that murder is wrong. And so then I think, yes, I believe murder is wrong because I value life. Life has its own inherent value. And so sustaining that for as long as possible is morally good. All right. Okay, I just explain to you something that you intuitively already know and understand, but you can trace it all the way back to, once again, the idea of I'm trying to improve my own subjective experiences as a consciousness, as a being, and so I would like to continue doing that. Therefore, murder is wrong because ending that experience prematurely does not allow me to actualize the maximum of my well-being. And those are things that I feel like I get to choose. Not everybody agrees that choice is real. Some people don't believe in free will, which, for a long time, once again, and I think if you're a Christian, you definitely believe in free will because there are concepts in the Bible and concepts in most Christian religions of being a free moral agent, that you get to decide whether or not you are going to follow a certain path or go down a different path that has been told to you is wrong. And so now you have to choose either to take the right path or the infinite options of all inaccurate paths, right? That's kind of the way that Christianity works. Follow this path or be wrong. That's really, that's kind of the ultimatum of Christianity. And, I'm not a big fan of ultimatums, certainly, but, they work. They definitely do, especially if you're with younger people, impressionable people, or people who are just really desperate to believe in something because there's that constant anxiety of not knowing, where you came from or where you're going. So, and so really what I would like to do is, because I am fairly experienced with the Bible and Christian denominations and faiths and things like that, I would like to really try to focus a little bit more on the spiritual side of Christianity and not the dogmatic side of Christianity. So things like prayer, I would like to talk about prayer. And I would like to talk about whether or not Christians view prayer and meditation as different things. Because I certainly view them as different things. They've been applied differently in my life from time to time. I don't pray. I meditate every day. I know that, people like my grandfather, I consider my grandfather to be one of the most spiritual people I've ever met. He, I believe, does both. He prays and he also meditates. Reading something and then meditating on it. What does meditation mean? Is Christian meditation different than Buddhist meditation? Or do they apply some of the same principles? Are they vastly different? Do they result in different experiences? Because I think what you'll see in Buddhist or Taoist or Hindu meditation practices is that you've got vastly different types of meditation that accomplish different things. I mentioned Richard Lang earlier in the podcast. Richard Lang's type of meditation focuses on something different than another style of meditation that you can find on that app. Actually, I think there are several different styles of meditation. Some focus on loving kindness, some focus on mindful awareness or mindfulness, conscious awareness, conscious mindfulness. So, like, there are, which you're like, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. So then there are other, instead of viewing yourself as a person in the world, you view yourself as space for the world. Like, there's a different kind of meditation that results in that perspective of consciousness. And so you start to realize, like, there are a lot of different doors in your mind that allow you to see things from a different point of view that may expand your understanding of what you think reality is. So, like, there's a lot of there are a lot of different ways that I think we should not only explore, but also try to track. I really want to try to figure out exactly what's going on. Because I've heard about religious experiences from people in the past. I've had a religious experience. I shouldn't say religious, spiritual experience. The sum of religious experiences can be vastly different. But I'm talking about, like, kind of having well, to use an old adage, the come to Jesus moment. That there's some sort of actualization in the mind, something that goes on that is you don't feel like is natural, something or that you've never experienced before. And I want to know exactly what's going on in different people's minds, how they perceive those things, and whether or not that really is just sort of a subjective thing, that every single person is different in that respect, or if there is, in fact, some consistencies there in terms of how people come to these realizations and how it affects them and all of this. And there's plenty of science out there already to that effect about a lot of these things. And so, I want to dive into that stuff. I don't want to say that we're coming up with new knowledge here. But for me, it's new. And I think for a lot of people out there, it's new. And so, I would love you to go on this journey with me. Because, I think that when you figure out that you really want to ask these questions, you realize that you're more interested in asking the question than you are the answer itself. And I find actually asking the question more interesting than any singular answer so far. So I'm going to continue to ask these questions about all this stuff. And it's going to irritate some of you. I understand that, right? And I feel like I may have already irritated some people. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to say that the way that you perceive the world is wrong. I'm saying that there are a lot of different ways to see the world. In fact, I think that there may be infinite ways to do so. And, but I think that we can maybe try to figure some stuff out. We got to start creating roadmaps for these things. I feel like the psychology, religious, spiritual fields have just almost out of prideful ignorance allowed science to own a certain level of methodology. Like you're not allowed to apply logic and reason to the way that you believe. And what I mean by that is not that you're being illogical, or that a lot of people, I know plenty of people are illogical, and then they get pushed on why they're illogical, and then they say, but I believe, I base it off of different things than you base. I don't base it off of objective criteria like you do. I base it off of seeing somebody follow a certain path in life, and then I look at how successful they are, and I see, okay, well, it worked for them, so maybe I should do that. And then that's how they live their life. A lot of people do that. That's not necessarily a terrible way to live, but you are, once again, picking up on context clues. So I think it's just simply say, we wait for the holy text to reveal the truth to us is not a really, I think it's lazy. I think it's incredibly lazy, to just say, these guys did the work and now the work is over and it's just our job to follow it. And it's not our job to do any more work, to come up with new ideas or new ways of thinking about things. On the path or on the shoulders of giants, man, come on, really dive into this stuff and let yourself be willing to not only question the way that those people have framed the world, but also to follow, what you think is the right way in terms of answering questions, and maybe you'll come up with some new idea. That's kind of my hope here, is that collectively, as a group, humanity, we can come up with some new ideas about how to be religion and how to be religious and how to be spiritual and how to believe. Because I don't think that we have that many good ideas right now. I'm kind of upset. I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in you guys and myself for not taking this more seriously. So, yeah, I mean, that's really kind of, and I say that tongue in cheek. I really do want to try to expose myself to as many ideas as possible, because I think that we might start to find some common themes, some really common themes that we can build on. And you know what? I will say this, everybody will look a lot of times at spiritual people as crazy. And I'm starting to understand that there is a energy about some people who just kind of, it's not like they've figured it out necessarily, but they've figured it out that they're never going to figure it out. But they know the path to making that loop in your brain psychologically, to where you feel good all of a sudden about not knowing. And, some people are already there, and, kudos to those people. I wish I knew your secret. And then usually they say there's no secret, which you'll start to realize that when you listen to gurus or spiritual whatever people a lot of times. That's what they say. They'll say something to the effect of, you're going to try really hard to not try for a very long time, and then you're going to realize you don't have to try, and then it's going to happen, and then you're going to feel enlightened. I hear that all the time from spiritual people, and it's a really patronizing thing to say to somebody else, which I don't think that they really realize. But that's just kind of the way some people, that's just kind of the way it works. But that's kind of where I'm at. So this is going to do it for episode number 2. I know that this may not have been as entertaining a discussion as you had liked, but certainly please help us build upon it. I've got tons of ideas, tons of just general thoughts on belief and things like that. But my point in this episode is to let everybody know my openness to exposing myself to new ideas. And as many new ideas as possible. And then trying to, as objectively and scientifically as possible, try to catalog those ideas and then come to some level of consistency about all of this stuff. Because, we've got to start, we have to take our experiences out of our own heads a little bit more often and be willing to share the things that we're really afraid to share. And I think religion is one of those things. Belief is one of those things. Morality, faith. Faith is a very fascinating concept. I would like to do a whole show. To my next show, we'll do a whole show on the concept of faith. I have a ton of thoughts on faith. Faith is very interesting to me. Because I think that there's a really practical reason for its existence. However, I don't think it's the same one that most people who like faith believe it to be. I like faith, but I like it for a different reason than subscribers of faith. So we'll talk about that next episode. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. Once again, I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast. Really, my only goal right now is just to try to grow this podcast. So please, if you've made it this far, to the very end of the podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Please share it with people who you think would be interested in this. Please do not share it with somebody who you do not think would be interested in this. That's one of the things that I don't want this to be. And some of the people who are listening right now are going to really appreciate this. I don't want anyone to feel like they're being forced or having a conversation about religion or spirituality forced upon them. I really understand the pain that a lot of people who feel like they've had religion forced on them in the past feel like it's the damage that it's caused in their life. So I really don't want to do that. But I would certainly love feedback from you and feedback from everybody in the audience who's willing to give it to me. So please, by all means, do not hesitate to email me. You can email me at our brand new email address. Brand new, I think therefore podcast at gmail.com. So I think therefore podcast at gmail.com is where you should email me. Please do so there. I want to thank everybody for listening once again. And I will see you next episode. Later, y'all.